sink in. Out of all of the theatrical animated franchises that have been made, Ice Age is currently the longest one. Not Toy Story, not Shrek, and no, we're not counting spin-off movies here. Puss in Boots is an offshoot of the main Shrek series, and so are Minions and Planes to Despicable Me and Cars respectively. But even if we did count the spin-offs, the Shrek and Cars series would only tie Ice Age, which has had 5 movies released following the very same narrative from 2002 to 2016. And in my opinion, what has become of Ice Age is perhaps the most tragic and severe decline in quality for an animated film franchise so far. Don't believe me? Well, we've gone from this to whatever this is. In many ways, the long-term effects of the real Ice Age directly contrast that of the franchise. In the actual Ice Age, temperatures gradually reduced, but in the Ice Age franchise, the movies rapidly became less cool. And I'm gonna try to break down how that happened.
Come on, wait up! Wait up! Wait, come on, Philip. Can you wait a second, please?
Back in 2002, the world of theatrical feature-length computer animation was still very much young. Sure, by that point it had been 7 years since Toy Story had come out, but the market was far from being as densely crowded as it is now that Norm has assumed territory of the North. Computer animation was still in many ways a novel idea, and Blue Sky Animation would be only the 3rd major studio to enter the fray. And enter they did. I still remember seeing the trailer for Ice Age on the big screen and being pretty awestruck by its scope. It was simply the film's opening, showcasing the ice-related havoc a saber-toothed squirrel the world would come to know as Scrat had wreaked. It was a deft combination of the cartoon slapstick my 5-year-old self instantly knew to love, with the quietly haunting and jaw-droppingly intimidating scale of the iceberg, arguably a vaster landscape than I had ever before seen in the computer-animated realm. This Ice Age movie looked pretty amazing, and I anticipated it as if it carried the sheer importance of the actual historical event. Though thankfully it ended up being far less painful and far more genuinely great. Like the trailer that announced it, the film had a charming simplicity to it, but it was not without a sense of gravitas. And it was a gravitas that none of the sequels that followed seemed to even attempt to match. But the simplicity would never really be there again either. The series became simultaneously concerned with ensuring that nothing on screen carried much in the way of weight, while also keeping itself overly busy and frenetic, with more unnecessary acts and digressions and characters added to the ever-growing ensemble as the overall focus became increasingly fragmented. The original film was extremely contained in regards to its cast, and all of its actions served a charmingly simplistic purpose. Pretty much every action scene in the film is both in service of protecting the baby Roshan, and tightening the bond between the potentially traitorous Diego and the rest of the herd.
You could have died trying to save me.
That's what you do in a herd. You look out for each other.
Meanwhile, in Ice Age the Meltdown, nothing matters, so this can happen.
They just sit there, watching us.
I wish I knew what they were thinking.
Food. Glorious food.
Food, wonderful food, marvelous food, glorious food.
And no, these vultures are not the antagonists of the film. We just do this and then it's over.
There. Now you know what they were thinking.
For seemingly no reason other than to reference Oliver. Because, you know, when you think of the Ice Age, you think of the musical adaptation of Charles Dickens' classic Oliver Twist novel, don't you? Isn't it a natural fit? At its core, the original Ice Age film is the story of an ostracized sloth in constant danger of becoming prey, a bloodthirsty tiger who's responsible for the sacrifice of a human mother to save her child's life, and a suicidal mammoth, traveling north to freeze to death, not caring who he tramples in his way, disillusioned by the murder of his wife and son, all united by the plight of the aforementioned child. The sloth, Sid, projecting his own feelings of helplessness onto it, is the most adamant about returning it to its family. The mammoth, Manny, understandably, is initially reluctant to intervene, given that it was human hunters that killed his family, and he also perhaps sees too much of his own dead son in this infant child. And the tiger, Diego, having lost the baby for his pack, is tasked with retrieving it, and in the process comes up with a plan to backstab Sid and Manny as well, to redeem himself in the eyes of his brethren. But as the film goes on and they all grow closer, he finds himself willing to put his life down on the line to protect them. In Ice Age Continental Drift, there are pirates.
I'm a primate pirate pioneer, and these are my brave buccaneers.
Let's move on.
Can I tell him our secret? Come here. Come here. We're very, very stupid.
Now, I'm well aware that the Ice Age franchise doesn't exactly have the best reputation in the animation community, but this is the third highest grossing animated film franchise and the 16th highest grossing film franchise of all time. It's currently beaten out Mission Impossible, The Hunger Games, the entire DCEU, just to name a few. The first film was fairly successful worldwide, the sequel though made significantly more, and then the third film is where we cap out, with the next film still very nearly equaling that. But you may notice that while the series continued to collect a fairly consistent sum from North America, it did pretty much all of its growing in international territories. So why did the Ice Age sequels have such a strong international appeal? Well, for starters, Ice Age has a lot of zany action set pieces in it. Like this one, for instance. Or this one, or this one. Well, let's stick with this one. Now imagine if this scene was in Portuguese! Would you still be able to understand it? Well, of course, it wouldn't matter at all, because there's no nuance to be lost. You wouldn't even have to re-record the screams with the foreign actors. It's ready to go. No, I mean, I guess there's the occasional interjections from the voice actors amidst the action. But hey, any scene with Scrat is actually really completely ready-made for the entire world. But it's one thing for no translation to be necessary. Any franchise with action can claim that. Ice Age, though, has the unique distinction of not being about any one race or being tied down to any one territory. While other films may try to pander by incorporating a globe-trotting adventure into their plot or trying to have as diverse a cast as possible, when you're looking at prehistoric animal characters in the Ice Age, it's simply all too easy. The movie isn't filled with white American faces. Anyone can identify with these characters, no strings attached. But it appears the appeal may have finally run out. Ice Age 5 had significantly lower returns than 3 and 4, and I think it's unlikely that we'll be getting a 6th, unless it's direct-to-video. So what made this one finally fail to carry on the momentum? Does it have something to do with the fact that the 5th film is the worst one of them all, having finally reduced the series to utterly pandering aimless trash that should burn in a fire for the rest of time itself? No, I think it's because in the credits of the 4th film, they made the grave mistake of showing the actors' faces on screen, singing like they were in some sort of charity music video. It was at this moment that international territories realized the characters were played by Americans! The secret was out! And they wanted nothing to do with the movies anymore. Yes, the little weasel with severe orthodontic issues gets his own category. Call him the OG CG non-English speaking sidekick character. That's right, before there were minions, or the Lorax animals, or flushed away slugs, or any other example of this trend you could think of, there was Scrat. Scrat is voiced by the director of the original film of his franchise. Funny how that happens. You know, a creator tells their compelling story and then disassociates themselves creatively from follow-ups that continue to make more and more money, and yet still is asked to continue to scream into the microphone because that's all they're seen as good for now. Their unintelligible vocal interjections metaphorically signifying the utter nonsense that their initial work has been degraded to. Scrat can be seen as a sort of slapsticky holdover from the cartoon days of Europe, planting its flag in the new frontier for animation. Truth be told, there's something very difficult about trying to convey classic cartoon slapstick in CG. There's a fine line between zany, Looney Tunes-style antics and the realistically solid, cruel and unforgiving world of computer-animated pain. Somehow, though, Blue Sky managed to strike an effortless balance with Scrat, and I think that's because they took advantage of the fact that he is in a relatively real computer-generated world. Sure, they tend to go for some backdrops that are decidedly more simplistic and cartoony than that of other animated fare, but there's inevitably a limit to which a three-dimensional world can feel like an old-fashioned cartoon. So the juxtaposition of Scrat's misadventures with the genuine weight of the film's atmosphere, both visually and narratively, is irresistible. They also, in the first film, managed to retain the delight of classic cartoon shorts by keeping his appearances, short. Other than his big scenes that kick off and close out the film, he's worked in as a little tag to other scenes revolving around our main characters. He either pops up in the middle of one of their scenes, or the camera just pans over them at the tail end of another. Scrat's little moments are punchy and engaging, and it's not just so he never overstays his welcome, it's so the film as a whole can maintain a clear focus. You never feel like you're waiting around for his inevitable appearances, you stay invested in the main storyline so that each time he pops up, they surprise you. It's like a quick moment where the baton of focus gets passed off and then passed right back, fittingly. But imagine if Scrat got that baton and just took off running, and everyone was like, hey, you gotta give that back, and he went, Well, by movie 2, we got to the point where Scrat has his own fully formed sequences, and not just in the beginning and ending, various complete sequences that can be strung together into a subplot, culminating in an epic sacrifice that lands him in a heaven full of acorns. But since Ice Age won't let anything including itself die, aside from, of course, Roshan's mom, he's of course brought back to life. You might see this as a tasteless mockery of the concept of death that the original film had dealt with in a mature and meaningful manner, But like, you know, oh well. The real point here, though, is that if you're going to use Scrat, you need to distribute him across the film very carefully. Fail to make him entertaining enough and face making the audience annoyed, you're distracting them from the main storyline. But make him too entertaining, and viewers will wonder why the movie isn't just all about him. Who am I kidding? Even phoned-in Scrat antics are often more engaging than the main plots of these sequels. I'll say this, though. When you upgrade a character as silly as this to subplot status, his premise really should be unabashedly fun to rationalize it. They've done a few Scrat cartoon shorts where they come up with diverting gimmicks, like him time traveling all across history with this really rapid-fire pacing of the gags, but in the films, what do you have him doing? In one of them, he uses a map to search for Scratlantis, the payoff being rather shamelessly stolen from the Ice Age 2 plot. You know, he enters a veritable heavenly paradise of sorts full of acorns only to lose it all. In the most recent film, he goes to space, and he's on a spaceship. And thanks to the scenery, it feels drastically out of place with the rest of the film, and for something so absolutely exaggerated and absurd at its core, we don't go nearly far enough with the gags to justify the inherent insanity of it all. At his best, Scrat taps into our most primal values of classic comedy, garnering laughs from the young and old alike. And at his worst, is used when the filmmakers decide the film can't be sustained by its own, narrative, and the movie abruptly gives up on itself and shows you an old Roadrunner cartoon instead. Can you imagine if, like, more bad movies did that? Like, can you imagine if Suicide Squad gave up and just cut to Wile E. Coyote for a few minutes? The sad thing is, as out of sync as it would be, I have to admit it would probably be an improvement. And that really says it all, I think.
Scream, whimper, scream, scream, whimper.
Exactly.
Where's the baby? There he is. Where's the baby? There he is.
Stop it! You're scaring them!
Hey, remember how in the first Ice Age film there were humans? Well, since that first film, we haven't seen a human in Ice Age. Oh, until Santa Claus in the Christmas special. I'm not kidding! So if you want to count him, be my guest. But yeah, a lot of viewers wondered, myself included, in Ice Age The Meltdown, well, why wasn't Roshan included? I mean, they explicitly set up the idea of him getting older in the first film.
Maybe we shouldn't do this.
Why not?
Because if we save him, he'll grow up to be a hunter. And who do you think he'll hunt?
Maybe because we save him, he won't hunt us. Ow!
Yeah, and maybe he'll grow fur and a long skinny neck and call you mama.
So I think that especially made us fans want to see that get paid off. But Roshan is never seen nor even mentioned again. Why? Well, I've tried to find an answer. I've scoured interviews and behind-the-scenes featurettes, but nothing has provided an explanation. I vaguely recall having read something online about how the crew decided against reincorporating the humans to the storyline because it would have been too predictable, that it's what everyone would have expected. Which, I guess most people expect some sort of overarching narrative cohesion. Idiots! But to be fair, we didn't necessarily need the humans back. When I asked the proverbial question of, where's the baby? What I'm really asking is, where's the heart? Because that's what the baby supplied, an emotional anchor that, much like it gave all these characters with varying objectives something to latch onto and care about, it did so for every viewer as well. It was this universal sense of hope that everyone could get behind. So what ended up being the emotional core of Ice Age The Meltdown? Is it Manny trying to find love again? Is it Sid yearning for respect?
You need to start treating me with some respect.
I want respect! Is it Ellie, Manny's new mammoth love interest, realizing that she's not really a possum? Yes, this is a conflict that takes up much of the focus in the second Ice Age film. And allow me to carefully explain what the problem with that is. In case you didn't know already! So everyone in the film is under the impression that all other mammoths are extinct and that Manny is the last one remaining. But Manny is hoping to perhaps find love again, even if it seems impossible. So let's think of all the ways we can go with this plot. Alright, let's. It would have been challenging and interesting if Manny didn't encounter another mammoth. Or if he did and she was incompatible or uninterested. They do neither of those. But hey, that's fine. I wouldn't necessarily expect them to. It's pretty sophisticated, so let's see. You could still mine something interesting out of a romance plot. And admittedly, probably the biggest attempt at an emotional moment in Ice Age The Meltdown is this flashback of baby Ellie right here. Unfortunately, there's nothing here other than, I guess, she as a child was roaming around alone, for reasons unexplained. Her parents just, I don't know what happened. Until a possum found her, creepily stared at her, and made her his child. Like you do! Fine, sure. But the point of this flashback in the story is to make Ellie realize she's a mammoth. She could have just remembered that and thought, oh wow, I guess I was adopted. I wonder where my real possum parents are. And then they would have went, oh, He still doesn't know! If you compare this to the cave painting scene from the first film, now that is a transformative scene for the Manny character, in which we come to fully understand his hardened perspective for the first time. That's when we realize why he didn't want company. That's when we realize why he was pushing everyone away, because his family was killed! The way this scene is positioned in the story, though, we already figure some approximation of this must have happened in order for Ellie to think she's part of a possum family, so we get no deeper insights into the character as a result. The real heart should be coming from whether or not Manny feels like he has the strength to try and start a family again after the tragedy he faced last time. And watch how quickly this movie glosses over that. We just get this one scene. Here's the only exchange that touches on it.
So what's holding you back?
My family.
You can have that again, you know.
No, Sid, I can't.
This scene feels like such an afterthought, when it should have been the core of the story. But instead you have this really out there idea of a possum. It's original for sure, this idea of a mammoth who, has managed to avoid looking at reflections all her life, apparently. But beyond, the fact that if she ever looked at some water, she'd know she was an entirely separate species, there's a huge issue with this creative direction. Think about it. What's the reason for this female mammoth to have this bizarre identity crisis? Well, irony, right? Because Manny is told that no other mammoths exist in the world, and now the one he finally happens to find also thinks mammoths don't exist, because she isn't even aware that she is a mammoth. She thinks she needs to hang upside down from the trees and play dead to avoid hawks and possum, hijinks. And we are given this hijinky, anticky story instead of allowing Manny to come across another mammoth and realizing the reasons he's not an instant love story waiting to happen is not because of some bizarre tangent of her thinking she's a possum. It's because love doesn't work like that. No natural disaster can ever spur two people to fall in love automatically. Love has to be earned, not found. Trust me, I would know about love. I'm making an Ice Age review! Thankfully, though, the movie doesn't entirely sidestep Manny's misguidedness. Ellie does eventually call him out on the notion that they're obligated to mate just to preserve the species.
I was just saying that it's our responsibility.
What?
All right, that came out wrong.
Obviously, that's a wrong-headed notion, and they do attempt to convey it as such, but tackling why it is wrong-headed should be the focus! It shouldn't just be a quickly tossed-aside joke about how possums Krasnetti think Manny's a pervert now. I'm not exaggerating there. I'm using the movie's words verbatim. I'm using the light-hearted, toned-down, for kids Ice Age 2 movie's words verbatim. They call him a pervert in the movie!
I can't even look at him. Pervert!
But because we have to deal with the tangent of Ellie not knowing what species she is, the conflict goes from being about, is there any love here, or is it merely being explored because it's the only option our nearly extinct species has, to, derp-a-doo, she thinks she's a rat! The only person in the world who could be my wife believes herself to be a rodent. Why does this always happen to me? Oh, just another one of those days. At least Manny and Ellie will get over this little rough patch and be able to have a child next movie. Because our heroes can't look after a human baby that isn't their own. But what is this, an animated allegorical fable that goes in a unique direction? They need to take care of their own babies. Which brings me to...
One big happy family. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Then where's your big happy family?
The definition of a big happy family is a lot stricter than it should be. This nuclear family syndrome is a really unfortunate fate for this animated franchise to fall privy to, especially when you take into account the fact that it started out with an unconventional family unit at its core. And it's not the only animated franchise like this. Take Despicable Me, for instance. I personally love the idea of this redeemed evildoer single dad raising these 3 little girls, who is strikingly different and unique, and yet a highly lovable family just the same, showing us that families come in all shapes and sizes. But when they announced the sequel, I realized, oh god, I know what they're gonna do. They're gonna give him a wife, aren't they? And not only that, they make it like the kids feel like they're an incomplete family without a mother.
You mean I pretend I have a mom?
Yes, right? You can do that, can't you?
Yeah, I do that all the time. Thanks, Gru.
But what's wrong with single parents? Can't we embrace different kinds of families? Why is the overarching arc for a refreshingly unconventional hero to gradually conform and integrate into what society deems normal and acceptable? It's a conspiracy, I tells ya! Which brings me to Ice Age. The whole appeal of Ice Age was that everyone felt alone and was feeling the whole family left in their hearts. Manny's family was given the axe. Sid's family abandoned him. And the closest thing Diego ever had to a family was toxic and out for blood. They had all been burned by past experiences and were basically finding a second life through the herd, which wasn't a direct equivalent replacement for their families, but it didn't need to be this traditional construct, since it still filled that void for all of them just the same. But screw that, right? Manny needs a wife and kid again, to replace the ones that got speared. In the first film, Manny learned that even if his family's gone, that doesn't mean he has to stop caring about anything that comes his way. He can slowly accept new people into his life and feel content. In Ice Age 2, Manny's just so excited to get a new wife. Hardly any reservations. His old family? What's that? Diego, of course, also needs a girlfriend that he can marry and plan to have kids with. Because isn't Diego the type you can see settling down like that? And Sid needs a girlfriend too. And a sassy granny played by Wanda Sykes.
All this sweetness is gonna rot my teeth. If I had any.
Even when it seems like they might finally mix it up a bit and have Manny's daughter become romantically involved with a mole hog named Lewis, which, say what you want about it, but it would have certainly been a break from the norm, the character in the next film gets downgraded to a non-speaking cameo and then she just marries another mammoth. Because they gotta keep that pure blood! And as a result, the bond of our main characters has been weakened severely. The herd, if you could even still call it that, has slowly become compartmentalized into individual nuclear subsets, to the point that you wonder why any of them even still hang out anymore. Because they no longer need stand-ins for the family they once had. Now each of our herd members, and even some of their offspring, have found their real family.
You know what's so funny is just then when you said real family, it weirdly hurt my feelings.
Well, Ellie giggled, and then she wiggled. Hee 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 hee! Boom!
Don't ever do that again.
I have no idea why she's acting so weird.
Women.
And now we've become a neutered sitcom lacking realism. And when I say realism, I'm not talking about scientific realism, okay? Because I know a lot of people complain about, these movies that aren't scientifically accurate. I'm sorry. They're not going to be. If you're still going into the movie 4 and 5 thinking maybe this time they'll explain it all and it'll make sense, it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen! Even as early as the first film, which that one, they made an effort to kind of make that scientifically accurate. They still ended up going, I don't know, let's invent a saber-toothed squirrel. I know it didn't really exist, but let's just put it in there, Oh wait, they actually discovered a fossil of one in real life. Anyway, I'm talking about emotional realism here, alright? I'm talking about how even though the fifth film has a meteor hurtling towards Earth that's gonna kill them all, it still plays as the most laid-back, drawn-out, and lazy of them all. A lot of long-running animated franchises have now been falling into the trap of losing a sense of stakes as they go on, because the further you go down the catalog, I guess the more you're supposed to expect babysitting fodder. By the time you get to the third Shrek, our title character, though facing the inheritance of a kingdom, faces no accountability when it comes to claiming it. He just hands it off to an animated Justin Timberlake, no sweat. Sure, he has some jitters about becoming a dad and has to deal with the wimpy son of the villain from his last movie, but it basically amounts to a particularly hectic weekend for Shrek, rather than a defining arc like in the first two films. Madagascar, even though it sucks, went from having Alex the lion on the brink of succumbing to his predatory urges to the point he pleads his friends to stay away for their own safety, though it's thinly resolved at the end of the movie by feeding him sushi, to them going ahead and joining a circus with pretty colors for the kids in 3D. The point I'm trying to make is that the more we go on in these animated series, the more it seems like we're dredging up these characters again and again just to throw some gags together and put out a cheap, quick product. Now, if that headline doesn't say it all, I don't know what will. So yes, I think once we become this accustomed to characters, you're encroaching on sitcom territory.
You, keep away from my daughter.
Dad, nothing.
And you're grounded.
But I didn't.
Sitcoms can be great though. Ray Romano, voice of Manny himself, starred in one of my favorites of all time, Everybody Loves Raymond, which was always ripe with familial conflict, and managed to wring some really honest laughs and even thoughtful observations out of its grounded situations. Sitcom scenarios at their laziest, though, is Puss and Donkey wackily swapping bodies because we need to give these characters something to do in this episode. I mean, feature film!
What the? Oh no!
Another lazy sitcom scenario would be Diego being afraid of water. Yes, that was the entirety of his subplot in Ice Age: The Meltdown. Conquering his fear of water.
Water.
In the last film, the character attacked a tribe, mulled over betraying Manny and Sid, and ultimately laid his life down on the line to protect them. Even in the original version of the film, actually dying. And in this one, he's a cat who doesn't want to go in the water. Splissy splash splash. And in the end of the movie, he goes in the water, splissy splash splash. Character development!
Listen, you have to leave me here. If those humans get through the pass, you'll never catch them.
You didn't have to do that.
That's what you're doing, Herd.
Since you don't really care about any one thing too much, sadly it almost makes sense to skew tangential. This is a movie in which Scrat can be off doing his own completely separate thing. Manny will have scenes with Ellie that only vaguely involve Sid and Diego as encouraging friends on the sidelines. Sid can have a totally irrelevant segment where he's hailed as the Fire King.
Fire King.
Huh?
Where this pointless character, Fast Tony, will pop up and do a little salesman stick. I don't think anyone even remembers Fast Tony existed other than me. But those possums, Crash and Eddie, oh man, I'm sorry, but these guys were the beginning of the end of quality comic relief characters for this series. Say whatever you will about what Sid eventually devolved into, but the original Sid was extremely vulnerable and desperate for companionship since absolutely no one cared about him. He also had noble intentions. Again, he was the most adamant about returning Roshan to his family, with absolutely no motive other than doing the right thing. Initially, even at the expense of losing Manny as a protector. Plus, the fact he's constantly ragged on by Manny and Diego ensures that whatever annoyance he creates is afforded payback.
Will you cut it out?
Hey, do that again. He likes it.
It's making me feel better, too.
Crash and Eddie, on the other hand, are even more vulnerable in the animal kingdom, and yet are extremely cocky and obnoxious. They have no self-esteem issues to speak of since they have each other and Ellie, who rarely ever gets fed up with them. Even when it seems like you could say they're being good protective siblings by calling out Manny for coming across as a pervert. Not even 10 minutes go by before this is said.
What if we're the last creatures left alive? We'll have to repopulate the Earth!
How? Everyone's either a dude or our sister.
Pervert!
And trust me when I say that whatever little relevance they had to the second film quickly disappears over the course of the rest of the series, to the point where they just become baggage the other films are forced to deal with. I guess any long-running sitcom is bound to fall into the trap of building up a whole slew of recurring characters they need to keep on dragging, and dragging through the mud! But if you think we've been spread thin by the second film, well, just look at how many characters we're juggling by the most recent release. There's Manny, his wife Ellie, their daughter Peaches, her fiancé Julian, there's Gavin, Roger, and Gertie, who are our highly unnecessary antagonists in a movie with a meteor coming to Earth. There's Diego, his wife Ellie, their daughter Peaches, her fiancé Julian, Diego, his wife Ellie, their daughter Peaches, his fiancé Julian, Diego, his wife Ellie, their daughter Sid, his fiancé Julian, Diego, his wife Ellie, their daughter Sid, whose fiancé Julian is actually a construct of Buck's mind, and of course, Scrat, who is in outer space!
Everybody make it?
Sarah, Manny, Crash, Eddie, Ellie, Granny. Ah, shoot, I'm out of fingers!
Do you want to know how many of these characters leave an impression? I'm gonna let you take a guess. Go on. Hey, I'll wait. None of them! It really just makes me want to go back to basics with the original trio again. And when I saw the trailer for Ice Age Continental Drift, that's what it seemed like was gonna happen. And I was excited, because the main three were going to be separated from the rest of the cast, and it seemed like we'd be returning to the old dynamic, maybe gain some genuinely funny and sweet insights into these characters again.
You know, my mother once told me that bad news was just good news in disguise.
Was this before she abandoned you?
Yes, it was.
But of course, before long, they crossed paths with pirates, and even before that, Sid's sassy granny played by Wanda Sykes. And there is nothing deeper driving the character drama forward than the fact Peaches is a kid, doing kid things, and the parents have to react and deal with that. Again, going back to Everybody Loves Raymond, yes, Ray and Deborah had children, 3 of them even, but they knew to keep them in the background and focus on the more interesting and meaningful interactions between the adults.
It's not really about the kids.
That kept it from falling into the cutesy, overused trappings of many other family sitcoms. And yet, when they did focus on the kids, they still managed to really make you care. They did stories about maybe one of the twins is going to get held back, and do we need to hold back the other one so that they stay together? And oh my gosh, actually Ray finds out that he was held back too. Is he passing off some sort of dumb gene to his twins? He feels really guilty about that. Or there was this one brilliant episode when they thought their daughter Allie wanted to hear the sex talk, so Ray came in for it, and then this happened.
What a man and a woman do is...
No, I mean, know that the man and the woman have to do something, but why are we born? Why has God put us here?
And then the whole rest of the episode was just this big existential conversation about the meaning of life.
What about the beginning of time? What was it before that? Before time? Nothing? I mean, what is nothing? How could there be nothing? This doesn't bother anybody else?
But do you think we care about Peaches at all? With this character, we're just sallowly coasting through all of the big milestones of a child's growth, with no sense of genuine attachment whatsoever. In the very end of the third movie, she's born. Then in the fourth one, she's a teenager. And then in the fifth one, she's getting married. In a sitcom, we watch as the kids grow up before our eyes. Often they'll gradually grow up alongside the kids in the family that are watching the sitcom from the other side of the screen. So like, when they do a graduation episode, or the prom, or they go get married, you know, you feel like you're part of the celebration. You feel like you were along for the ride. But with this, we didn't even meet the guy who ended up being Peach's husband until the beginning of the movie, when we're quickly introduced to him and then we're just told they're gonna get married. We didn't even see them meet or anything. When my friend watched this movie, she asked, wait, have we ever seen this character before? Because the movie sure acts like we should know who he is, but we don't! We even had a whole slew of teenage mammoths in the previous movie. You could have took your pick from one of those instead. Of course, if you insisted on her marrying another mammoth and not Louis the Mole Hog, you narrow-minded and prejudiced people. I'm still rooting for you, Louis, buddy. You could still swoop in there and get her. And trust me when I say that those teen mammoth characters were truly intolerable. And they talked in millennial speak, and they were the cool mammoths, and Peaches was trying to fit in with the cool mammoths.
Whoa, Peaches. Don't stress. You're with us now.
Yeah, stress is so stressful.
Yeah, girl.
And they even get a little redemption arc at the end.
Brave-alicious.
Even though they don't deserve it whatsoever, and they should have died at the end of the movie. But this new random character is intolerable too, so you might as well have taken advantage of the series' history. You know, like a long-running sitcom would. Because that's what you are!
So light 'em up, light 'em up, light 'em up, on fire!
You know, the original film had dry, understated humor.
Hiya, Manny. Hi, Diego.
Hey, Sid.
Oh, sure, it had its share of antics, but it didn't need a ridiculously over-the-top expression or an on-the-nose musical florist to sell a joke.
Sid, the tiger found a shortcut.
No thanks. I choose life.
And now they've all been replaced by the occasional quip and some horrifically out-of-place modern jokes.
And by the way, you look nothing like your profile picture.
Profile picture? What profile picture? What is the Ice Age equivalent of a social media account? What am I looking at? What is this sitcom foolery? Oh no, Sid can't get a date. And Manny forgot Ellie's anniversary, so he's in the doghouse. Whoa!
Anniversary? Oh no.
Also, he's not too big a fan of his son-in-law.
Oh, look at me. I'm Julian.
Can they work out their differences before the big day? There's a lot of bland to complain about, and I mean a lot. But there's one moment that really, it's offensive, okay? It's within that plot of Manny not getting along with his son-in-law to be, okay? It's this very moment that let it sink in for me that we'd hit rock bottom, and this was the series' lowest point. 37 minutes in, Ice Age collision course, here you go!
If we survive, we lose our daughter.
Well, I've been thinking about that too. What if...
Ooh, I know! We destroy the relationship, right? That way we never have to let her go, and she'll just stay our little girl forever!
No, you psychopath!
And that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the moment in which we have lost any pretense of Manny being an actual main character. Up until this point, I at least still had the sense that the character genuinely cared about his family. But now, as he legitimately, fervently suggests, ruining the love of his daughter's life out of an overtly stated desire to keep his little girl forever, the uttermost center of his family drama, the uttermost center of the film's drama, reveals itself to now be a complete facade, built for the most generic of sitcom jokes and nothing more. Do you still not believe me they've made this series into a soulless sitcom grabbing desperately at Cass? Oh, need I remind you of the Christmas special they did? Yeah, Christmas special, set in the Ice Age. Christmas wouldn't exist yet, because Jesus Christ wasn't born yet. But for the most superficial reason you can imagine, that there is snow and it looks wintry and Christmassy, I suppose you could understand why a Christmas special would be ordered. But then they made an Easter special! This is real! I'm not making it up! And it gets even sadder, folks. I'm in too deep, okay? For whatever reason in this special, they have all the characters apparently living in their own houses now. And they essentially are watching television, basically. And like really, everyone has their own house. Even this random bunny tertiary antagonist from the fourth film that returns. He has a house that he's living in. Everybody has a house. And okay. This is what broke me. Officially. This line made my heart sink all the way down to my feet. And I don't think I'm ever going to be able to get it back again. Listen to this.
Manny, come out here! Your daughter is talking nonsense!
Manny! I'm in my Manny cave watching the Hawks-Bears game! I'm in my Manny cave.
My Manny cave. I never thought I'd see the day where this character, this tragedy-stricken, emotionally closed off, once suicidal character, would make a pun about his I can't even repeat it. I don't know if I can go on to this. I think I'm gonna go extinct. I need some optimism. I need to feel better. So, I'm gonna discuss how, even if they wanted to adopt this lighter, sillier tone for these films, there's a way they could still have made it better.
This was fun! We could make it a regular thing.
I don't know about that.
Right. Yes, because of all the mortal peril, of course.
You may have noticed that up until now, I haven't really addressed the third entry in the series, Ice Age, Dawn of the Dinosaurs. And well, that's because it's the Ice Age 3 Guilty Pleasure section. That's right, baby! I think this is the second best film the series has to offer. Why? Yeah, a lot of this can be attributed to the Buck character played by Simon Pegg. Buck is an absurd, frenetic, highly welcome adrenaline shot to a series that was just starting to ease into all too comfortable of a pattern. He was this insane weasel with an epic feud against Rudy the dinosaur who took his eye, and he gives this film some much-needed vivacity. But more quietly, he lends it this subtle sense of poignancy.
I never thought of going back. I've been down here so long, it feels like up to me. I'm not sure I can fit in up there anymore.
Which reflects well on all the other characters' arcs in the film. That's right, this time the characters, while somewhat numerous, all have some sort of purpose. In fact, Diego's arc about feeling like he's losing his edge seems like a direct response to that terrible excuse for a subplot about him being afraid of water.
Water!
Buck's boldly adventurous attitude wows the disillusioned Diego, but he soon comes to realize that, while it seems like a fulfilling existence, at his core, Buck's really just trying to fill the void within himself. Buck offers a personal manifestation of an alluring concept the film presents of a life spent living in constant danger to avoid the creeping feelings of loneliness.
I'm so lonely!
There's a strong emphasis on the potential for change in this installment, seeing as the herd may be splitting up. Yes, remember that stuff I was talking about, how the characters were starting to feel distant from each other? Well, in this one, it's directly addressed how Manny's seemingly settled in with his family, and it may be time for Sid and Diego to branch out.
Things have changed. Manny has other priorities now. Face it, Sid. We had a great run, but now it's time to move on.
This leads Sid to think that he needs to move on and adopt some eggs that are going to be his babies. And yeah, you know what? A parallel that we have to the original film, characters raise babies that aren't of their own species. I guess that's the key to making a good Ice Age film. And Manny, now an expectant father, tries to construct a world that can be safe for his daughter, since the tragedy of what happened to his family before is quite clearly still in the front of his mind. Before I get too ahead of myself here, the film is not without its flaws, mind you. There are some truly groan-worthy references to Yabba Dabba Doo and the Alvin and the Chipmunks Christmas song,
Hasta la vista, birdie!
And the story definitely takes its time getting started. Overall, though, what really makes this one stand out is that it kept things fresh. Just look at this completely new scenery for a change in this underground dinosaur world we'd never seen before. It gives this Ice Age sequel an individual sense of identity that can be hard to come by in a long-running series in which imagery is bound to frequently repeat. And check out what they do with Scrat. His only motivation in any of the other films is getting that acorn, but in this one he's wooed by Scrat. So they have a lot of fun pushing and pulling the character back and forth between his two objectives to great comic effect. Heck, at a certain point, Scrat gives up on the acorn entirely for the good old-fashioned love of a woman, and the acorn gets a musical ballad with customized lyrics from Gilbert O'Sullivan's song Alone Again, naturally. It's quite hilarious and fresh, and they never even come close to topping it in the following films. It says something when all of the characters, including Scrat, fit into this theme of moving on to bigger and better things. Plus, they managed to bookend the series in a satisfying way. Once Peaches was born, I don't know, that really gave me this sense of finality.
That's right, sweetheart. Welcome to the Ice Age.
Manny had gotten back everything that was taken from him all those years ago. We had come full circle. And if it ended here, I'd have been happy. Look, I'm not trying to hold this up as the model animated film or anything, but you know what? As an Ice Age sequel, it rises above the rest to such a degree that I feel it's worthy of the distinction. It just goes to show that lightening the tone isn't an inherent problem, just in the way that a light tone in general isn't an inherent problem by any means. So long as you make a fresh and entertaining story that feels like a crucial installment of the series, however crazy, it can work. It can. Great stories come in all shapes and sizes, just as families should come in all shapes and sizes. There is room for lighthearted zaniness. There truly is. And there is hope and potential for this franchise, even in its current form, with the set of expectations it now carries. We've all had a tumultuous relationship with at least one piece of media we've loved. And we've stuck with it through its growing pains, for better or worse, or even to the point where it seems like it's just going to keep on getting worse and worse and worse. But here's to that dedicated level of fandom that sticks through it all with an open mind. Here's to finding that Men in Black 3 was actually pretty fun, or that Community could find its footing again once Dan Harmon returned after Season 4, or that Cars 3 ended up being the best of the entire series, or that Glee Season 6 was better than 4 and 5. But for what is passion, if not a commitment to stand by something, no matter how hopeless it seemingly becomes? It's the kind of unconditional love that only a family can offer. I didn't choose my family, and I didn't choose the things I ended up loving and becoming attached to. But both are a part of me, now and forever. And I'd be lying if I said I could change that. So good night, good luck, and remember, he's not fat. It's all this fur. It makes him look poofy.
Tell you to run. Know what to say about the young.